Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Gray, you mentioned the excessive amounts of overtime, and it's been mentioned several times in this hearing. Do you have an idea of how many overtime hours are being worked annually?
So I think when we looked at, so with respect to the agent population, we just don't think there are actually accurate records for that, because what we found was agents routinely enter 8 hours and 2 hours of law enforcement availability pay time, even when they're working 17, 18, 20 hours. So that, I think, we think the accurate records for that are difficult to find. With respect,
let me ask you this. If the agents are not logging the hours they're working, does that mean they're uncompensated for overtime?
Well, they're getting paid for the 8 hours and their LEA pay. You know, I think, frankly, we want a high-performing culture. We don't want a group of individuals in the Secret Service punching the clock. I don't think they view it as uncompensated time. I think, but certainly they are working, extraordinarily long hours, well beyond what anybody has measured.
I don't think I'm communicating this correctly. What I'm trying to find out is within your budget process, you have so much budgeted for salaries and benefits. In certain certain professions, when you work beyond not beyond 8 hours, but beyond 40 hours, you're compensated for your overtime. Some is time and a half, some is straight time. That's what I'm trying to find out.
Certain. So in the uniform division, they are compensated for overtime, and what we found in the uniform division side is that there were wide variations. Some people were working extraordinary amounts of overtime. I think the precise number I don't have right at my fingertips, but I think is 58 hours on average. Okay. But again, with wide variation.
All right, that's almost 50% more than what they normally should work, and obviously that has implications for stamina over time. If you're working consistent hours, working those kind of hours on a consistent basis, it also, though, has a budget impact, because generally you shouldn't be budgeting personnel to work those kind of hours. So what I want to know is, if we're paying for this, does it make sense to be paying for overtime when we could convert what we're spending on that to new personnel?
And I do think that is a finding of our report, is that rather than bring on new personnel and train them up and get them ready, what happened was the need kept increasing. The personnel on board did not keep increasing, and they essentially substituted overtime for bringing on new personnel. So again, you're looking at the chairman's chart. If you see the gap in hiring and the number of classes that go through, that is made up through overtime. And we think a less tired workforce would, some of that obviously would be compensated in bringing on new people, having a less tired workforce. Some of that would be compensated by less overtime.
Well, even on the training side, you could have them trained up, but if you're working that many hours, you're reducing their effectiveness. But the thing that gets me is, it's a management issue, is that you're spending money on overtime, and someone's making a decision to pay overtime rather than bring in these new hires, which would reduce the demand on your personnel. That just doesn't make sense.
We agree with that.
The clock changed. I mean, I thought for a moment there that I was out of time. The thing that keeps coming up, and from some of the other testimony that I've heard, is it seems to be there's an overall decline in morale in the service. And I commend you for the work you're doing. I don't know how much input you had into the report that we read on the recommendations for reforms, but I wholeheartedly support what's in the report, particularly bringing in someone from the outside. I'm a big believer in bringing people in from the outside into a huge organization, because they can see things that nobody else inside sees. You develop a culture over time where you just start to miss the obvious. So I want to encourage whoever needs to be encouraged to pursue someone from outside the agency, at least in a transitional type setting, to be able to come in and make the changes that will bring the agency back up to the standard of excellence that you've enjoyed for years and years and that we all expect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.